you've got an EVM and Ethereum chain. Of those, there are hundreds of different Ethereum layer ones, or even completely different blockchains, but they're all using the same kind of Ethereum instruction set, Ethereum kind of language to build out the blockchain. So all of those, you can quite easily kind of take the same indexer that works on one chain and make it work on the next. The challenge there becomes more about the cost of doing so. So if you wanted to interact with 300 blockchains and you're having to now run indexes for 300 chains, that becomes quite expensive. We're working with DIA data at the moment who provide oracles, and we've just brought in Codex, who's another provider that works on a lot of very in-depth trading information on the blockchain, kind of tokens, pricing, flows, that kind of thing. So we're expanding from just being these index data sources that people prepared to bringing in external data sources as well. What can be done on a blockchain? The kind of management process, I would say, the management, the payment, and the governance can all be done on a blockchain. Obviously, the blockchain isn't able to personally deliver your food to your house, but more the management of the tasks, the payments, the receipts of what's been happening at each step can be done on a blockchain.
Welcome to the Ventura Labs podcast. Today, we're joined by Daniel Vulinovich of Hermes Subnet 82 to discuss enabling AI agents to read blockchain data. The conversation covers why language models struggle to parse chain histories and how Hermes uses subnet participants to evaluate GraphQL queries through synthetic and organic challenges. Daniel discusses the AI economy, utilizing on-chain execution for trustless task management, the integration of data sources, subnet tokenomics, and plans to develop a vast array of bundled agent skills. Now, back to Daniel with the 87th Ventura Labs podcast. All right, Daniel of Hermes Subnet 82. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get right into it. Subnet 82. What is the problem you guys are solving here?
Sure. So Hermes is building the bridge between AI and blockchain data for the emerging autonomous agent economy. So as AI agents begin managing wallets, interacting with decentralized identities, interacting with proof of ownership, executing trades, or interacting with smart contracts, they face a fundamental problem that they can't understand blockchain data and they can't understand what's going on chain. So Hermes is solving this by giving AI agents the sensors they need to see, understand, and then act across the entire on-chain world.
All right. Why is blockchain data hard for AI agents or LLMs to interact with?
Yeah, it's hard for agents and also people to interact with. So you might think that I can simply point my OpenClaw at Ethereum and it's going to be able to work out what's going on there. But by design, blockchain is a long list of everything that's happened from the very first block to the most recent. So there's millions and millions of blocks on there, millions and millions of different changes that have happened. If you're trying to work out what happened, say, on a specific wallet, you actually need to start at the very first block and go through all of them to get a history of kind of all the trades that this wallet's performed. This usually takes about 2 days to go through. So if you're thinking I'm going to ask OpenClaw, hey, to summarize my transactions pointed at Ethereum, you'll be waiting for 2 days of intensive operation and hundreds of dollars kind of in infrastructure to get that done. So it is very difficult, and we'll get into some of the kind of tooling that's been around before soon as well, of how we've been solving that.
What is the way that Hermes attacks this problem? Am I saying Hermes?
We say Hermes internally.
Okay. Yeah.
Might
So
not be
what is the
correct.
way you guys are attacking this problem? What are you guys rewarding miners for doing here?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, either a user or an AI agent is going to ask a simple question. So or a question in English language. So if we keep the previous example of, give me a summary of what I've been doing with my wallet. This question first hits the validators, goes down to the miners, and the miners are competing to be able to answer that question best. So it's kind of best is considered different aspects, but there is the information they're providing accurate, but also did they understand the user's question well, and have I provided the answer in a timely manner? So as they keep answering this question, Hermes gets better and better at asking questions that people ask on about blockchain information.
My understanding of how the subnet operates is you guys ask a question like you're saying, and you have miners create the GraphQL query to find the answer.
Yeah, that's it. So how it typically works, because the blockchain is quite difficult to interact with directly, there are people already who've run what's called an indexer, which is where we extract. So there might be an indexer for a wallet on Ethereum, where they've extracted all of the transactions for all the wallets and put it in a normal database, maybe a SQL database, which can then be queried on pretty easily. So the most common way to query that information is using GraphQL. So what we have is a large data set. It's structured, but there's not necessarily an easy way to get the information you need. You need to actually go to a GraphQL query, specify what are you looking for and what do you want in the results, and then bring that back. So it's very free, very flexible, but that also makes it quite difficult to do.
What is the database that you guys are doing these queries on that you evaluate the miners for?
So the information that we're validating could be on a variety of databases. So we don't specify where it is. We bring in data sources into Hermes. And most of those at the moment would be index projects, as I mentioned before. So they would be either using subquery or the graph, and those mostly use a normal SQL database. But we are also bringing in other sources. So we're bringing in, we've already integrated with Codex, who is a data provider, and we don't know what they're using. It's kind of not important here. The important thing is validating the information that we get back when we talk to them.
Okay. So, in terms of the technical implementation here, the evaluation of the answers being correct or not, how do you guys do that? What's the
Yeah,
source of
it's
truth, essentially?
it's a good point. One thing to mention is that we're working in a system here where a user or an agent is asking a question, and there's some ambiguity there. I think a lot of the challenge is just trying to understand when a user asks a specific question, what exactly do they mean? So we're kind of improving the results that comes back from that question. So the system we've set up at the moment kind of ranks the result from 1, which means a bad result, to 10. And we're considering anything above 8, so kind of an 80% answer to be accurate. We're not looking here for, say, 100% accuracy of data as being the goal. We're more improving the flow of the user asks a question. How do we understand that? And then pull the data up from the chain and then bring it back and present it to them with the interpretation of both sides, the interpretation of the user and then of the data of how to present that back.
Probably best from my understanding if we just walk through a specific example. So, if we continue that example of the Ethereum, find all the transactions for a specific wallet. Can you walk me through the entire flow of how this works with the subnet?
Yeah, of course. So we'll take the Ask Hermes platform at the moment, which is the easiest way for someone like you or me to directly ask questions onto Hermes. So currently on Ask Hermes, you are wanting to ask a question about my wallet. So there'll be an option to select the data source, and there could be an Ethereum wallet data source there. I'm going to ask my question, so please summarize the transactions of my wallet. And from Ask Hermes, it will go first to the validators. The validators are going to select the best miner to answer that question, which I'll get through just in a second. That question will go down to a miner, and then when it comes back, it'll just be verified by the validator to make sure that the miner has provided a correct answer. From the miner, it will go back to the validator and then back to the result that comes into Ask Hermes. So the flow for a single question is pretty simple. What goes into it is the process for possibly months beforehand of the miners optimizing to get the best results in this kind of situation. So I can talk about that if you like.
Yeah, one point that's still slightly unclear for me is the how do you validate or decide what the correct answer is for that? Do you guys have to go answer the question yourself and validators share essentially a test set of answers?
Yeah, a bit of both. So that does go exactly into the process of how we're improving the result sets from the miners. There's a mixture of organic and synthetic challenges. We call them challenges that go down to the miners. So the synthetic challenges are generated every epoch, and they are a list of questions that the validators give to the miners, but they're not necessarily real questions from the users. So a validator might prepare 1,000 different questions and send it all to the miners. Because the validators have prepared these questions, they already know how to get the correct answer for these. They're synthetic challenges. So, for example, they might already know the right query I'm going to get this information. So, if the challenge was summarize my blockchain, my transactions for this wallet, the validator already knows exactly how to do that, and then is sending these synthetic challenges down to all the miners and seeing the results they get back, kind of judging them based on performance, the speed that they return the results, and also the accuracy and the understanding of the question. So with those synthetic challenges, it's quite easy, I would say, to verify the results coming back from the miners. On the other half, we have the organic challenges. These are questions coming from real users. And that does get a little bit more difficult. One thing is that the verification process takes a lot of time, so we don't verify every single, or the validators don't verify every single real question that comes in. They're maintaining a rank of what are the best miners and how well they performed initially on those synthetic challenges. So we get a question, we send it to the miner that's been returning to our synthetic, answering our synthetic questions the best, and then we send that back to user. Every so often, so it could be 1%, then we actually do verify the results coming from these real questions to the miners. And in the verification process, we're able to take a lot more time and do it more thoroughly than what the miners do themselves. So if a miner returned with a list of transactions on this wallet, for example, we're able to go through one by one and go to the blockchain and check that each one of those are there individually, and also make our own query of what we expect the answer to be, and combine a lot of different kind of questions we've asked to the blockchain data to get a full map of whether this is correct or not. So it's a time-taking process. It's also expensive. You wouldn't do it for every question, but we're spot checking to make sure that the combination of the synthetic challenges and also a percentage of the real challenges that these miners are getting better at what they're doing.
And the miners return just the answer, or they return the query to get the answer?
Yeah, currently just the answer, but that's a shift that we're making. So we'll be asking them to return the real answer as well as their query, and that gives us more information to verify as well. So we can verify that the query looks right and that the data looks right. So it's the extra point of verification.
What are some other points on your roadmap of things you guys are looking to add into the future?
Yeah, so we are currently expanding the scope and building an AI agent for Hermes, which is going to incorporate everything that we've learned and all the improvements and all the data sources of the Hermes blockchain, so of the Hermes subnet. So just to start, so a few points I've mentioned already. One is that if you go on to Ask Hermes now, it's asking you to first select your data source. As we expand, planning to support 300 blockchains and potentially thousands of different indexes, thousands of different data sources. In there, we are combining all of that into one agent that you talk to first, whether that's a person or an AI agent that is OpenClaw, one agent that has the intelligence to know everything we have available to us and how to orchestrate the best question, kind of taken from one data source or from multiple of those before eventually getting that question down. So we're bringing everything into one single place, an intelligence layer for the blockchain.
Who do you guys view as well, AI agents and humans are the users, but what is the use case of it? Like, why would someone be like, hey, I need to use Hermes for this? And is it purely for the first things that come to mind as examples of how to use it is tax purposes?
Yep, yep. There's a lot of examples if we're looking at just on-chain usage. So tax could be one. Also, for example, fraudulent transactions. So you might ask OpenClaw, hey, please let me know if something dodgy is going on with the wallets that I'm managing in my treasury. There is also, for example, just asking for summaries of what's going on, what's happening, asking for if you're interested in trading, you could be asking for what's the activity happening on in blockchains and which is the most useful. If you're running a DeFi portfolio, you might be asking, please check out my portfolio and make sure it's balanced against my criteria. As the token prices changes, it might become unbalanced. Something becomes worth a lot more, and OpenClaw will be able to let you know that your portfolio has become unbalanced. If you're feeling very brave, you might allow it to fix that issue as well. But I wouldn't recommend that personally. There's a lot of scenarios on chain. I think what is kind of very exciting for me though is more looking at the broader change in computing. And I think actually understanding that where we're going now is very well suited to blockchain. So kind of the changes in the past few years, first you've had with the LLMs, the ability to talk to a computer in natural language. And we've gone through that. Hermes can do that, is translating a simple question into something the computer can understand. But the bigger change coming through now is the kind of agentic shift. So now we have a whole economy of computers that are working on behalf of their users, on behalf of their owners. And still that might be kicked off by a natural question, asking for a scenario, hey, can you please order my groceries, for example? But then there'll be a long chain of different agents talking to each other and assigning tasks to each other to get eventually from working out which groceries I need to which supermarket to order them from, going through the delivery. There's a big chain of agents performing work. And each agent needs to do a few things. One is they need to assign the task, they need to assign the payment, and they need a contract in place to say that only pay out this payment, which is an escrow, if the events actually happen. And as you're now having these computers working on behalf of people, that's when we realize that the whole blockchain ecosystem that we've been building is actually perfectly placed to be able to solve these challenges.
Okay, that touches on a lot of different things there. But essentially, the biggest point I take away from that is the AI agent economy, you're saying, will be essentially all on blockchains. Every interaction of AI agents will occur via a blockchain.
Yeah, what can be done on a blockchain? The kind of management process, I would say, the management, the payment, the governance can all be done on a blockchain. Obviously, the blockchain isn't able to personally deliver your food to your house, but more the management of the tasks, the payments, the receipts of what's been happening at each step can be done on a blockchain.
It takes that trustless like interaction between agents. That point happens on the
Yeah,
blockchain.
exactly. Yeah, that's it exactly. It's very well suited for it when you have uh, already proof of personhood or decentralized identities. You can say this agent is able to act on my behalf and I've given it permission, and that's something you can actually show. You can prove that it's got permission, or you could prove that this agent is working on my behalf and I own this car and it's going around looking for insurance quotes. It's able to provide the real proof that it is able to act on your behalf in these circumstances.
That brings up a very interesting point of proof of identity. Will you guys be adding that into your repertoire of what you do for the subnet in the future of linking a physical like person or identity to a specific wallet?
In those cases, it's not that we would be doing that step ourselves, but we'd be bringing it in as a data source. So we'd be bringing it in as a source of information that Hermes can pull from. And so when a question's asked, it is able to access that information. And that's where the kind of shift we're going from individual data sources into kind of a wide intelligence engine for blockchain, is that when the user asks a question, we could do various steps. We could check also who is this agent representing, pull information about that, then go to another place to pull more data sources and bring all that back together to one intelligent answer for the agents.
So once WorldCoin takes off and they'll become a data provider to Hermes that can be how the agents do this?
Yeah, that's one option. Yeah. We're expanding very fast, kind of the different data providers that we're including. So we're working with DIA Data at the moment, who provide oracles. And we've just brought in Codex, who's another provider that works on a lot of very in-depth trading information on the blockchain, kind of tokens, pricing, flows, that kind of thing. So we're expanding from just being these index data sources that people prepared to bringing in external data sources as well.
What is the data source that you guys don't currently have that you're most excited for the possibilities of unlocking? It can be something theoretical as the proof of identity stuff or something that actually already exists, wherever you want to take that.
Yeah. Personally, for me, it's what I've been most excited for in blockchain, I would say, is kind of around the decentralized identity, decentralized ownership. That's a personal interest of mine, um, where we work with a lot of good teams that are kind of working on that. But at the end of the day, it's a governmental issue. Is the government going to allow you to put your identity on the blockchain and provide that? So that's what I would love to see, but it's not something I can kind of pull together data for. It needs to be a real shift in allowing identities to be decentralized and on the blockchain, as well as ownership of cars, houses, that kind of thing.
Bringing up the government, you said fraud as a potential use case of the subnet. Do you see partnerships with governments in the future? Is that who essentially users or clients of this subnet could be? Is that the target here?
At the moment, um, we're looking more at probably more individual people, individual agents who are needing to interact with the blockchain. The reason is, as I mentioned before, we're working to kind of understand the question well and provide the best answer. But we're not looking at providing 100% identifiable or identifiably correct information of a specific use case. So in theory, yes, we could do this. A government could run through Hermes and say, please identify if any of these transactions are suspicious, and it would work. But a government itself is probably more interested in working with a professional provider that's kind of focused on that area, focused on that specific data set, and able to provide kind of a place to blame if things go wrong.
What is the tokenomics, that buzzword term of this subnet? Is there any incorporation of the token into the economy of the subnet? Is there any flywheel aspect?
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple of ways that the token gets involved. One is obviously uh, using AI agents performing LLM kind of queries has a cost. And anybody that is wanting to get involved with Hermes is able to hold Alpha token and use the product for free. So it's kind of like instead of paying a subscription, if you want to use it, you can just hold Alpha tokens, sign in to Ask Hermes, sign in to the Hermes AI agent that we're building as well, and have a certain kind of tier, a certain limit of access for free. So we're bringing in as many people as possible to try it. I'm also bringing in different people into the Potenza ecosystem and as token holders. The other side is anybody who is integrating. So if we're looking at an OpenClaw agent, many of the payments are going to be done with X402, so in kind of stablecoin payments, and that gets paid to the Hermes Foundation, who are then able to kind of buy back tokens, for example, based on the revenue that they're earning from real users using Hermes.
All right. Um, let's see if there's anything I missed. I think I've covered nearly everything. Daniel, do you think there's any other questions that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you, or interesting topics on? What's your current agent setup? How many open claws are you running?
I'm just running two at the moment. I'm very personally, I'm very security focused as well. That's kind of my one of my passions outside of blockchain and security as well. And we have like a fully sandbox set up at the office, and we're kind of going between how much we can get done by the agent, and I'm always pushing back to the CTO, who is Ian, and pushing back and saying, just make sure we're not giving OpenClaw too much access to our environments, and to our emails, for example. So we've been playing around with it.
You're a blockchain guy, so tell me, what is the optimal security setup for a wallet? Is it the proxy with the multi-sig and you just rotate keys, or is there something else out there?
Oh, I'm probably not an expert in that area, but yeah, multi-sig proxies with each person having a hardware wallet would be the kind of the gold standard. So
Okay.
you asked before kind of what else, what I like to focus on. So I just mentioned kind of as we're starting to build the Hermes agent, there's a few shifts we're doing there to get this to work very well. So they'll be coming in the next couple of months. So one is that we're changing the focus, as I mentioned, from being on specific data sources and changing that to being on skills. So a skill could be a wallet skill, for example, where there'll be a set of kind of tasks that Hermes is able to perform around wallets. And in that case, it might be using many different data sources instead of just a single one, where also involving the miners and not just to be able to query a specific data source, but able to take in a question and the miners themselves able to work out and keep improving which data sources do we need, how do we combine different information here to get the best answer for that specific question. So it's a big shift away from just providing an interface to be able to ask a specific data set questions in natural language to being people able to ask a broad question and this intelligence engine able to keep improving on how it answers that from everything available to Hermes.
Mm, okay, so the shift goes from asking a question about this specific database to
Yeah.
you just ask a question and a miner has this broad, however many databases it can search over to give you an answer.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And able to combine as well. And using the best models, we're able to combine that into an intelligence based on many different data sources to provide the best answer to the user. The the second shift we're doing here is we're looking at uh, optimizing specific skills. So say we are focusing on wallets first, and maybe 1 or 2 months from now, the miners are all providing very good answers. So we're getting all of the agents are providing answers quickly, and they're providing them faster and cheaper than a traditional LLM. Also providing better answers than a traditional LLM, and we're very happy with this level. So what Hermes will do then is package that all up into a skill, and it will be learning from the outputs, but also from the work that the miners were doing. So you asked before, right at the start of this call, whether they're providing just the answer or also their query working. So by them providing both of those, we're able to learn from that and actually train the Hermes agent, train the skill that we're building to then be able to answer that question very well without needing to keep using the miner set. So in that case, the miners will move on to the next skill that we're working on. So that might be DeFi, it might be around ownership, for example. So Hermes can keep on adding more and more skills, keep on adding more and more data sources, more knowledge, more intelligence there, without becoming bottlenecked by now there's too much here that the miners can't handle it anymore. Um, Also by allowing the miners to keep doing what they do best, which is improving the result sets as opposed to just handling throughput.
So you're essentially going to use the miners to build out this infinite API now.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah. So and infinite kind of uh, yeah set of skills, infinite set of questions that you can ask about the blockchain.
What are some other examples besides just like wallet, transaction? I guess identity could be one.
Yeah, 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 for sure.
He's pulling up his roadmap to to see. Go
Hmm.
touching the notes for that answer.
Yeah, of course. Also, for example, trading is a pretty common one.
Mm.
So as we mentioned before, people kind of asking about questions about different tokens, questions about what's popular at the moment and pulling in different data sources about that, different questions.
How hard is it to query one chain versus another? Like say BitTensor versus something like Zcash. How much difference would there be in those two type of chains for querying it?
There's a few
You can
kind of
also
a
go
few
with
different
another
levels.
example. You don't have
No,
to
no, no.
use the extensive Zcash.
Yeah, not too familiar with those specifically, but there's a few. So at the highest level, blockchains generally fit into standardization. So you've got an EVM and Ethereum chain. Of those, there are hundreds of different Ethereum layer ones, or even completely different blockchains, but they're all using the same kind of Ethereum instruction set, Ethereum kind of language to build out the blockchain. So all of those, you can quite easily kind of take the same indexer that works on one chain and make it work on the next. Um, the challenge there becomes more about the cost of doing so. So if you wanted to interact with 300 blockchains and you're having to now run indexes for 300 chains, that becomes quite expensive. But in theory, it's not that difficult. When you look at, say, Bitcoin versus Ethereum, or Ethereum versus Cosmos, Cosmos versus Polkadot, each of those are entirely different. So some certain indexes might work on all of them, or some might only work in some specific cases, as well as the form of interacting. So we're talking about receiving data, but also making a transaction is different on each of those families.
All right, Daniel. I have one last question for you here today.
Sure.
And that is, well, this one will probably have an interesting answer. How do you make funds as hard to trace as possible? That's not the question I'm going to ask you. The question is the I believe his name, their X account goes by like Zach XBT, the guy who traces essentially like hacks, and he
Yeah.
traces these blockchains. He's having to query these chains. What advice do you have for someone trying to trace funds on blockchains of how to be successful?
Oh gosh, that's a very interesting question. Um, the challenge there becomes similar to what Hermes is working on and what I just described before, where the cost of holding all that information for a lot of chains becomes very expensive. So for a single person doing it, I assume you'll be looking at first what kind of products are already out there that can help me in that area. If you're looking to build a product that does it, I think that would be a kind of a great business opportunity. Obviously, companies already do that. It would be with what I've seen working across blockchain is you need to pretty clearly define what level of breadth you want to get in terms of the blockchains you support. As we've been mentioning before, that there's hundreds of blockchains and some of them are quite difficult. I think a real challenge that we've had kind of in my past as well, working on Finality, which is an infrastructure provider, is the cost of supporting one blockchain or another is pretty similar, but some of them have very few users. So it's a big kind of curve around the blockchains that have the most users. And I think if you're building out a product in this area, is the first challenge is going to be to find your niche and how wide you want to go there. You might find that for example, the main products already available only focus on a very small slice of that, and you want to get wider, or there might be a gap entirely. I think the first step would be to very clearly define and understand which blockchains you want to be able to focus on, understand what that's going to cost you to include each one, and is it worth it? Is that your competitive difference, or is it just costing you money for very few users?
Daniel, well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's great to be here. Hope you have a great day.